You will be happy to know that the sleeve is actually very similar to the back and front pieces you have already completed. The only difference is that we will be knitting it from top down this time. However, if you prefer to knit it from the bottom up, that's totally fine too. I cast on 48 stitches for size S. Keep in mind that the recommended number of stitches is vary depending on the size you are making. For the row 0, setup row, slip 1 stitch knitwise, then knit all stitches across the row until you reach the last stitch. Purl that final stitch. Completing this setup row will prepare our project for the next rows. Keep up the great work. For the row 1 on the right side, slip 1 stitch knitwise, purl the next stitch, then yarn over, purl 2 stitches together. Continue repeating the yarn over, purl 2 together pattern until you reach the last 2 stitches of the row. Purl those 2 stitches. For the next row, row 2 on the wrong side, simply repeat the same pattern as for row 1. Keep repeating this pattern until you have reached the required length, which is noted in the knitting pattern. Great! Before moving on the cuff, take a moment to admire your work and check that the length is just right. And here's a helpful tip. To make any adjustments later, you can place a knitting lifeline at this point. Let's add a ribbed cuff to the sleeve. Start with a setup row. Slip 1 stitch knitwise, purl 1 stitch through the front loop, and knit the next stitch through the front loop too. Repeat this pattern all the way to the last stitch. Finally, purl the last stitch to complete the row. On the next row and all other rows, simply purl the purl stitches and knit the knit stitches through the back loop. If you are working in regular rib, keep going with the front loop. With these simple steps, you will be creating a beautiful ribbed cuff in no time. Work on cuff for about 5 cm or 2 inches and finish on the wrong side. Cast off loosely. This will help to create a nice edge that is visible on the front of the cuff. The sleeve is complete and we are one step closer to finishing our Halcyon sweater. Attaching the sleeve to the body is an essential part of the process, and it is exciting to see our project come to life. Before we start, let's lay out the knitted pieces on a flat surface. This will help us to accurately attach the sleeves to the sweater. Make sure that the sweater and sleeves are facing the right way out so that you can see the same cast-off edges on both pieces. Now, find the center of the sleeve and pin it to the shoulder seam. This step will help keep your sleeve in place as you sew it to the sweater. If you don't have any sewing pins on hand, no worries. You can also use a piece of yarn in a contrasting color as a pin. Once you've done, pin the sides of the sleeve to the sides of the sweater body. Repeat the process on the other side. Double check that everything is aligned correctly. The sleeve is securely pinned in place and we can start sewing. Grab your tapestry needle and a long piece of yarn about 1 meter or 1 yard in length. And start to sew from the center of the bottom of the armhole. No need to worry if you are new to sewing sleeves onto a sweater. It may seem challenging, but I promise it's easier than it looks. I'm here to guide you through the process step by step. So let's get started. Run the yarn through the both side stitches. Seam all the way around the sleeve from the bottom, around the shoulder and back to the bottom. Keep the seam straight and even as you go. If you don't have knit side stitches in the area of the shoulder, simply improvise and use the closest stitches you can find. Once you have sewn all the way around the sleeve and body, secure the end of the yarn. Great job! Don't forget to also fix the yarn at the beginning of the shoulder seam. How about we take a moment to check our work? It's always a good idea to make sure everything looks good before moving on. Keep in mind that sweater may elongate a few centimeters or inches after wet blocking. I will show you how to adjust the length of your sweater after it's been washed. If you are happy with the sleeve length after trying on the sweater, it's time to seam the underside of the sleeve. Begin from the armhole and sew up to the cuff. Keep the seam straight and even. Fix the sides of a sleeve to prevent any shifting while seaming. Sew the edge stitches all the way down to the cuff. This is similar to the technique we used before for shoulder seams and attaching the sleeve. I would like to make a seam in rib knitting as invisible as possible, so I run the yarn through the stitches near the knit stitches. Of course, there are other methods you can use as well, but this is just one option to consider. I think the seam turned out pretty good. I'm always trying to learn and improve my seaming skills. When seaming, pay attention to the stitch pattern to ensure that both sides of sleeve are finished at the same level. In the bottom edge of the sleeve, I improvise a bit and connected the appropriate stitches together. It's a bit of a creative process, but it's fun to experiment and see what works best for each individual project. Let's repeat the same process we just did to sew the other side of the sleeve to the sweater. Alright, we've got both sleeves sewn up. Now it's time to do a little comparison. take a good look and see if any tweaks need to be made to get that perfect fit. We also need to make sure the length of both sides of the sweater from the armhole to the hem are even. If both sides of the sweater look even, that means we are one step closer to completing our project. We have reached an important step in our sweater making process, seaming the sides. Before we begin, secure the sides to prevent them from shifting. We are going to repeat the same process we used for seaming the underside of the sleeve, but this time I will start from the bottom and work up to the armhole. Of course, you may choose to seam in any direction you prefer. I'm going to sew through the stitches near the knit stitches to make it look like the rib stitch pattern. As always, feel free to experiment and add your own personal touch to the design. I made a mistake with the edge stitches in the first few rows, but I can fix it by sewing through the closest stitches. Sweater's bottom edge looks not good, but I think I can use a crochet hook to make it look better. I will improvise and follow my intuition with the yarn. Once we have finished with ribbing, we can easily continue by sewing the side seam through the edge stitches. If you notice that the side stitches of your project are not matching up or there are some mistakes, don't worry too much. Just sew through the closest stitches instead, and it will help to hide any imperfections and make the seam look much better. So keep calm and carry on stitching. When you reach the armhole, handle the yarn carefully. It's important to fix it properly to ensure that the armhole looks neat and tidy. Next, simply repeat the process on the other side and voila, your sweater is ready to be tried on.